On
Very.
Ayin Gimel, 73. So the question is, what establishes the dira? Is it where you eat or where you sleep? So Rava says makam pita, where you eat. Shmuel Amar makam lina, where you sleep. So Meisve, we ask you a kasha. Aroyim, shepherds, v'akayotzim, these were guards that would watch the figs as they were drying out in the field. Va'burganin, these are also watchmen that watch other kinds of fields. The Shomrei Peiros, watchers of fruit out in the field. So, Bisman Shadarkan Lolin Ba'ir. Now, if they would go into the city to sleep, Harein Kan She'ir, their tchum, they could go anywhere in the city. It would be considered like 4 amas, and they could go 2,000 amas in any direction. Now, Bisman Shadarkan Lolin Basadeh, if they slept out in the field, Yesh Lam Alpayim L'chol Ruach, they only get 2,000 from where they sleep. So it seems, based on this brisa, that the din of tchum and the din of eruv follows where you sleep, not where you eat, which would be a kasha on Rav. Or answers hasam anan sari di mantu l'rivsu hasam tfein nichalu. No, if you brought there's no food out there in the fields. That's why they go into the city. But if they could have the food brought out to their huts out in the fields, they'd be much happier. They'd rather eat there. So really, they'd rather eat there. So it does follow where you eat. The Shulchan Aruch paskins makam dir liyin ervin hu makam ha'oichel v'lo makam alina. We paskin like Rav, not like Shmuel. That it's where you sleep. On Rav Yosef lo shmili shmaitza. Rav Yosef said, I never heard that halacha. Now remember, Rav Yosef was the Amoira who lost his memory. And we have throughout Shas that his Talmid Abaye would say, Omer Abaye, what do you mean? Amrit Ni'alam. What do you mean you didn't hear it? You told us it. The Aha Amrit Ni'alam, and this is what you said. Achin Shayoch Shulchan Aviyem. Brothers that, remember we had the case where fathers and brothers live in the same chutzner. And the brothers sleep in their own home, but they eat on their father's table. But yishenim b'vateyim. So we said tzrichen erev kol echad ve'achad. They require each. It's not just because they live with their father. It doesn't become like one family. They each need their own. Each one needs their own eruv. And based on that, now, if they're all eating at their father's house, and it's based on where you eat, why would each one of them need their own eruv? Well, it's because they go back and sleep in their own home. And that establishes their dira. And that's why each one of them have to participate in the eruv. However, they're eating at home too. When it says that they get a check from their father every month, they don't go to their father's house and eat, but they live off their father. The father sends them a nice check, and they sleep in their home and they eat in their home. So there's no raya, and in fact, that's since we did not knock Rav out of the box, we pass him like Rav. Guy has 5 wives, and they all live in the chutzner. They all have their own house, and the husband also lives there with his house. And Mekablis prosper baleim, and he provides financial wherewithal for them. The chamisha avodim mekablim prosper abayim. Or you have another case in a chutzner where you have avodim that have their own house. Who's there? 1 second. Sue? 1 second, please. Who's there? It's too late. It's too late. Who is there? Who's there? What's going on? Okay. And you have 5 avodim that live in houses. So Rav Yehuda say Matir Benoshim. Rav Yehuda says that with the wives, it's considered like one. It's like they're all living with the husband, and all 5 houses with the husband's house considered one house, so they don't need an eruv. But oiser bavodim, but the avodim have to participate in the eruv because they're not considered part of the master's house. Rav Yehuda ben Bava just the opposite. Matir bavodim, the oiser benoshim. He says the Eved clearly follows the master more because he's connected to the master completely. But a woman has her own importance, and it's not she doesn't hang on the husband as much, and therefore she's an independent entity. If she has her own house, it's considered her house, and she sleeps there, and therefore she would have to participate in the eruv separately. So there's a machlokes between these tanoim. So Amar of my time, Rav Yehuda ben Bava, D'chsiv Daniel Bisro Malka. Daniel was the servant of Nebuchadnezzar. Wherever Daniel was, it was considered that the court of Nebuchadnezzar was there. So you see, there's a very strong connection between an Eved and his master. Okay. Pshita ben Eitzel Aviv. We've already been studying sons with their father. We learned that. Kidamora. Isha Eitzel Baila ve'Eved Eitzel Rabo. We said it's plukted Rav Yehuda ben Beser, Rav Yehuda ben Bava. Is this machlokas we just discussed? What about Talmid Eitzel Rabo? What if a Rebbe and a student live in the same chotzer? Toshma, the Rav Bei Rabbi Chia Amar, Ein anu tzrichim la'arev. We are like one family. We don't have to make a separate eruv. We eat off Rav Chia's table, and therefore it's all considered one house. Rav Chia b'Rebbe Amar Ein anu tzrichim la'arev. And he also relied on this table of Rebbe. So there is a connection as well between Talmud and Rebbe. Boy minei abayim Rabbo. Chamisha shagavu say Ruvan. 5 people live in a chutzner. They want to carry into the chutzner, so they gathered money. They bought a loaf of bread. Now, if they're going to place the eruv in another chutzner, can they just send one, or do each one of them have to do it independently? They could just send the one loaf of bread. What about brothers? That's considered like they're trying to make an eruv. There we said when they're sending it to a different chutzner, each one has to do their own eruv. Yeah, but that's where the brothers were only living with themselves. But if they were living with other people, not just the father and the sons, but there were other people there, they were strangers. So migu dahani asri. So since the other strangers asr on them, haninami asri. So they will asr on each other as well. Therefore, they have to send their own eruv. When do we say you'll only use one loaf? When they send the loaf to another chutzner. But if the eruv is going to be put in their house, or there are no other dwellers there, then they don't have to participate at all. They just use their house. So it's clearly connected to this concept of whether there's other people living in that chutzner. Shma bina, that's a good raya. Boy ben Rav Chia bar Rav and Rav Sheshes. B'nei Bei Rav, the Achli Nama Babaga. The students of Rav would eat their food out in the field, and they would come and sleep in the yeshiva in town. V'asu baisi b'bei Rav. The yeshiva was in town, and they ate out in the field. Ki mashchina lehu tchuma, when they mark off their 2,000 amet tchum, mi bei Rav mashchina lehu, do they do it from the yeshiva in the city, or mi baga mashchina lehu, or where they sleep at night? Or they mashchina mi bei Rav. We measure from the city where the yeshiva is. Vari nosin es eruv b'toch alpayim am of osi ubayis bebasic the mashchina lehu tchum mi ruvei. Afraid the Gemara. Somebody who puts his eruv 2,000 amas from where he eats, but then later on he goes to sleep. For example, he laid an eruv 2,000 amas from where he sleeps, and then he went and slept in his house. You still measure the 2,000 amas extra that he gets from the place where he laid down his food. So it's not where you sleep; it's where you eat. The Gemara answers, Bahu Anan, here also, we use the principle of Anan Sadi. We are witnesses. Ubahad Anan Sadi, that the Bahu Anan Sadi, the E Mr. Lehosam, that if their food was brought to the yeshiva, they would both eat and sleep there. That means wherever they brought him the food, that's where they would be happy then. You know, they don't want to be schlepping back and forth. It's more nicha for them that if they brought the food to the Beis Harav, they could eat there. It would be happier, and that's why the yeshiva is the place where we measure their tchum. Boy Ram Barcham Rav Chizda, Avu Bno, father and a son, Harav Talmido. Kirabim damu or kichidim damu? Are they considered like one house or like multiple people? Meaning, let's say they're the only people living there. They have multiple houses. There's a father and a son. Do they even need an eruv if they want to use the chutzner? Or mavui shaleha niter belechi v'koira. Now, a mavui normally you can carry in the mavui if it's got a lechi or koira at the opening, but it's a difference whether or not there's a lot of people there. Rashi says the kaimelon ein mavui niter belechi v'koira shiu batim v'chatzeres pruchim l'sochel. So if a father and a son is considered two separate houses, so they're considered that there's two houses opening up in the mavui, then a lechi and a kor would work. But if they're considered one unit, then you only have one house. One house with a mavui is not niter with a lechi and a kor. That's the shaila. When there's no other people living with them, they don't need to make an eruv, and it's considered. The mavui is corrected with a lechi koira. But it's considered like a single house, not like multiple houses. Mishnah. Chamesh chatzeros psucha zulazu. You have 5 side-by-side chatzeros. They have openings, doors that open into each chatzer. Upsuchos lamavui, and they have doors opening up to the mavui. And they made an eruv between the chatzeros for lo nishtadfu b'mavui, but didn't make a shituf mavuos. So you can carry from chatzer to chatzer, mutar b'chatzeres, vasur b'mavui. But since they didn't make a shituf, they can't go from the chatzer to the mavui. If nishtadfu b'mavui, let's say they made a shituf mavuos, then that covers you both. Mutarim kan v'kan. You can carry from the chatzer to the mavui, and you can carry from the chatzers one to another. Let's say they did both. They made Erev Chatzeros and the Shituf. V'shachach echad mibnei Chatzer v'lo Erev. One of the people in the Chatzer forgot to make the Eruv. Mutarin kan v'kan. So it'll still work because the Shituf helps like an Eruv. However, the opposite, let's say one of the people live in the Mavui didn't make a Shituf, they still have an Erev Chatzeros, but they can't go into the Mavui. Just like you need to have multiple Batim opening up into a Chatzer to make the dinim of Chatzer and Batim, a Mavui needs the same thing. Rashi. What's the problem when you have 3 or 4 houses opening up into a chutzner? Both are Rishus HaYachids, but because multiple people have a shaykhus in it, it looks like a Rishus HaRabim. So same thing. When you have multiple chatzeros opening up into a street or into an alleyway, it also looks like, even though the alley is Rishus HaYachid, it looks like a Rishus HaRabim. Don't say that this relationship between Batim and Chatzeros is not the same as Chatzeros and Mavui. The bias for Chatzer Zurush is Ayachid, the Zurush is a Rabbi. No, Chatzer and Mavui Shteimer Shal Rabbi Mein. They're both viewed as a problem that you might confuse it with the Rishus Rabbi. Mani, who is our Mishnah like? Reb Meir. The Amar Ba'inan Eruv Uba'inan Shituf. He said you need both. So so say the middle. In the Shtadfu b'Mavui, if you didn't make an Eruv, you just made a Shituf, Mutar and Kavakan. So that's not Reb Meir, also Rabbana. The Amri B'chada Sakir. So Haloi Kasha, because V'im Nishtadfu Nami Ka'amar. It means if on top of the Eruv they made a Shituf, so you see the middle part is not arguing, it's all Reb Meir. Well, if that's the case, that they did both, Ema Seifa. They did both. One of the people, the Chatzer, forgot to participate in the Eruv. We said Mutarm Kan. We said the people in the Chatzer, Batim, can go to the Chatzer and vice versa, and they can go to the Mavui and vice versa. Well, how will that work? Hechidami. If the guy who didn't make the Eruv, didn't do Bittul Rishus, Idlo Botl Amai Mutar. Why would it be permitted? Elapshita the bottle. So must be that the guy who forgot to make the Erev did Bittul Rishus. Well, then next, Ema Seifa. Then say the next case of the Mishnah. Shochach echad b'mnei Mavui v'lo nishtat. We said, in contradistinction to the case where one of the Chatzeros people forgot to make the Eruv, what if one of the people of the Mavui didn't do the Shituf? We said, Mutar b'Chatzeros. They can still carry in the Chatzeros, but you can't go into the Mavui. However, what do you mean? Ida Batal, Amayasrim b'Mavui. He was Mavatal, his Rishus, why should he be able to go to the Mavui? So if he came Rab Meir ain't Bittul Rishus b'Mavui, are you telling me Rab Meir holds of this shita that you could do Bittul Rishus in a Chotzer but not in a Mavui? I'll show you not so. Vatanya Shari Bittul Lachem Rishus. So did Rab Meir. That's a case of Mavui. So Rab Meir does not make a distinction between Chotzer and Mavui in terms of Bittul Rishus. Elab shita Deloy Batal. The case only works where he did not do Bittul Rishus. That's why it's usher to carry from the Chatzar to the Mavui. Umid the Seifa the loy batal. If in the Seifa we're talking about a case where the guy who forgot to make the Erev didn't do Bittul Reservation, I mean the loy batal. It's got to be the same. Then you're stuck with the problem of Reish of a Seifa Rab Meir Mitzvah Rabbana. So the Gemara says no. Cool Rab Meir. Really, we can explain the Mishnah all like Rab Meir. The time of my Rab Meir being an Erev being in Shituf. Why did Rab Meir say you need both an Erev and a Shituf? Because if you'll never, the children will never see a case where you can't carry. But by Erev Chatzeros, most of the people made an Erev Chatzeros, so no one's going to forget the dinim of Erev. By a Mavui, it's going to happen. There's so many people there, and not everyone participates. People will forget. Amr of Yehuda, Rav Lotani Psucha Zulazu. When we described the case of the Mishnah that there were 5 Chatzeros and there was a door opening between each one of them, Rav did not have this Psucha Zulazu. V'chein Rav Kana Rav Lotani Psucha Zulazu. But Ikedi Amri, other people learn Rav Kana Gufe Lo Tani Psucha Zuluzu. Rav Kana did not read our Mishnah Psucha Zuluzu. Normally, about Rav Yosef, my time at Lo Tani Psucha Zuluzu. Why was it important for him to have a shita that the chatzers are not opening one into another? Because Ksavar Kol Shituv Shein Machniso Motzi Derech Psachim B'Mavui Lav Shmei Shituv. Now, if you have door openings between each chatzar, you can go from one chatzar to the other without ever going to the Mavui. But this Mandamer holds that if you do a shituf mavuos without going from the chatzar to the mavui, it won't. It's not a shituf. So that's why he had to have a girsa that there was no openings between the chatzeros side by side, and therefore the only way to go from one place to the other was derech hamavui. So on Eisvei, I'll ask you a kasha. Balabayis shayeshutuf l'shcheinav. You have a person living in a chutzner who had a partner in business. So we said that since they own a barrel of wine together, ein tzrichin la'arei. So in that case, the barrel of wine is sitting there. Nobody schlepped something from the chutzner derech the mavui. How come there it works? Was the answer to Hasam the Afke va'ailei. They did carry it to the Mavui and then brought it back to the Chutzner. So it's not a kasha. How do you do a shituf from the Mavui? You could just be mezakeh, right? You can say, this is I'm being mezakeh you in this shituf. But l'chora, what about moving it from the chatzar to the mavli? It doesn't seem to be a requirement. No, over there they also carried it from the chatzar to the mavli. I was makne you through kinyan bread in your basket. So obviously there also it wasn't taken out l'chora from the chatzar to the mavli. Are you going to tell me if you just say hikna lo pas basila, it's not going to work? It will work. Now, the chitem al chanami, fine, it works. But if they were eating dinner and all of a sudden Shabbos fell, they can rely on the challah in front of them, mishum eruv. And other people say even mishum shituf. They're not in the mavui, they're either in the house or in the chutzner, and yet you're doing a shituf mavus without going derech the mavui. A mavui will not be corrected with a lechi koira unless you have multiple batim and chatzeres opening to it. And therefore, if you have side-by-side chatzeros with openings, it's like one big chatzer, and you wouldn't have multiple chatzers. So if you have 5 side-by-side chatzeros, and they have doors going all through, we view that as one chatzer. If they open up into a mavui, you only have one chatzer, a mavui, that doesn't qualify for a lechin akor. Okay. We'll learn tomorrow, 8 o'clock, regular time.